Why doesn't Russia call it a war? Why do they call it a special military operation?
Well, who is that war with? I mean, if you want to have a war, right, you have to have an enemy that you declare war against.
Hmm.
Now, is it the Kiev regime?
Hmm.
Well, no, because it's not a sovereign regime. It's controlled from across the ocean.
Hmm.
So it's basically a proxy conflict, and declaring a war against a proxy is sort of useless because if there's one proxy, there can be another and another, etc. So that seems rather pointless. Is it a war against the United States? Well, no, because that would be a nuclear conflagration. Nobody wants that. It's a regional problem. Is it a war against the Ukrainian people? Well, no, because the Ukrainian people are Russian. They're just Russians who speak with a regional accent.
Hmm.
Um, but they're Russian Orthodox religiously. Their culture is basically Russian until there was this effort to come up with some kind of a local anti-Russian thing. They watched Russian television, Russian shows. They moved back and forth. I mean, the level of integration between Russia and the Ukraine is such that if Ukrainians move to Russia, nobody knows that they're Ukrainian. Maybe the first generation there might be a hint of something, but their children just become Russian
I
instantly.
mean,
So
this is
because
what I could say as an American, because I'm not from this area originally. It's hard for me to see the difference. And, one of my more popular videos, I went to a Ukrainian restaurant in Moscow, and I was asking, all these questions with the different people there with me and of the restaurant to try and figure out what the difference was. And it was almost like a joke. Like I couldn't figure out, how does this what makes this Ukrainian as opposed to Russian? So it was very eye-opening for me. For people that are like, let's say, just incensed with this conversation and they're all for Ukraine and they're trying to listen to us and they're getting mad and they're thinking, why doesn't Russia just leave them alone and just stay on their side? All these terrible things are happening. People are being deleted. I assume, like you said, that the idea is if Russia were just to pull back and just, let's say, leave them alone, then this not legitimate mafioso type government is going to go back to doing terrible things to the people of the country.
well, yes, basically it's a terrorist cult in Kiev, and it thrives on corruption. It is supported by the West, and it has to be dealt with. Russia has no choice but to deal with it. It's sort of like you know rats in the rafters or something. You have to get rid of them. Uh, Russia does not really have a choice to just sort of let it go. It doesn't have the luxury of that choice. And in terms of who is Ukrainian, who is Russian, well, it's pretty easy. Ukrainians are subservient to Washington, and Russians are not. This is how you draw the line. In terms of anything else, you might say, well, I'm Ukrainian because my father was born in Kiev. I have two grandparents who were born and lived in the Ukraine. My first love was Ukrainian. Lots of my friends throughout my life have been Ukrainian. So I'm about as Ukrainian as you get, except I'm not subservient to Americans. I live in Russia and I do whatever I want.
Is it something like saying I'm from Texas in the United States?
I suppose, yes.
Just like
I'm from Alaska.
a specific
Yeah.
territory. What are the best and worst likely conclusions to this conflict, would you say?
I don't think that there are any good conclusions because the damage has already been done. It's absolutely awful. I mean, an entire, very large, prosperous, rich, fertile, historically rich and significant region has been utterly devastated.
Because it's approaching 2 million on just the soldier side alone, correct? So it's
yes,
got to be.
If you consider it as an ethnic group, the Ukrainians as an ethnic group, they're done. They will never come back. The young people have left. The birth rate has fallen through the floor. It's going to be a country of pensioners, of old people that will never rebound. So it's not clear what's going to be happening to it economically because for the past 25 years or even more than that, it's been living off the proceeds of Soviet industrialism. And even though the Soviets built things to last, eventually all of that stuff wears out. Bridges, railroads, power plants, water mains, dams, all of that stuff in the Ukraine hasn't been maintained for that long, or has barely been maintained and just falling apart. So what we're looking at is an agrarian, deindustrialized, depopulated region, and that is the best that could happen to it. The worst that could happen to it is that there's the efforts to reestablish control over this territory by whomever fail, and then it becomes a lawless, drug-infested mafia state.
Now, you just mentioned the Ukraine, and growing up, when I would hear about it, that's the way I would hear it. I would hear people call it the Ukraine. And I think a few months ago, I was listening to, just for a moment, I think a liberal commentator on something, and he was quickly talking, and he said the Ukraine, and he stopped himself. And he said, "Oh, I apologize. I mean Ukraine," and it like triggered a switch in my head, and I thought, wait a second, is this like woke reframing? Because the Ukraine is kind of like the borderlands. It was an intentional changing of words to redefine what this place is. Am I wrong, or was it something like that?
No. Ukraine is the Polish version of Russian Krai.
Okay.
Krai, if you look at a map or a list of regions of the Russian Federation, all the ones that are over bordering some other country, not all of them, but quite a few of them, are called Krai. And it just means edge.
Mm.
So all of the edge regions are called Krai.
Mm.
And Ukraina is just the sort of Polish version of Krai.
Okay.
And
right.
it had a bunch of different names over time, but the new regions that Catherine the Great created, Kharkov, Donetsk, Lugansk, Odessa, Nikolaev, all of those that are now sort of drifting in the direction of Russia, or are already part of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Those were called Novo Russia, the new Russian territories. Before that, they were empty lands. Further west from there was Malorossiya, the small Russia, which had a very interesting history because it was sometimes part of the Russian Empire and sometimes under the Poles, and sometimes the Austrians made some inroads. Even the Hungarians had something to do with it. And it was rather mixed up and had a complicated history, to the point where Kiev was purchased by the Russian Empire from the Poles at one point. They actually paid money to get Kiev back. The term Ukraine, Ukraina, was not really used much until the 20th century. A post-revolutionary effort to create lots of countries instead of one big Russia, because it was considered too bad to have, and against communist internationalist morals, to have one big Russia. It had to be broken up.
Rolling?
Yes.
Did you like that clip? If so, click here. But if you love that clip, click here and watch the full video. Also remember to like, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, share before I disappear.